Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be at in the world. And welcome to Let's Talk Medtech, the premier podcast for the medical device industry. I'm super jazzed about this episode because we're talking to Medtech veteran extraordinaire Jim Hollingshead. He is currently the CEO of BVI Medical. The company specializes in tools and equipment for eye surgeries, such as products for cataracts, glaucoma, and retinal diseases. We're going to be talking about the company. We're also going to talk about Jim's experience in his career in medtech. So, without further ado, let's talk medtech with BVI's Jim Hollingshead. Well, good morning, Jim, and welcome to Let's Talk MedTech. Thanks for coming onto the program.
Thanks, Omar. It's great to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Anytime. Before we jump into BVI, can you talk about how long you've been in healthcare? Can you talk about your career journey?
Sure. Yeah, it's actually I've been in healthcare for, in thinking about it, probably longer than I would have thought. And so my career journey, I originally started life wanting to be a professor, and I went and got a PhD in the social sciences in political science, which I don't hopefully I don't offend anybody in the audience, but that's not the most practically useful degree one can go get. But as I finished my PhD, I decided I didn't want to be an academic, and I went into consulting. And so I had a career. The first 18 years of my career was in strategy consulting, and even early on, I started to do work in spaces like biotech. So as a consultant, I worked for a firm that didn't have industry practices. So I worked on a bunch of with a bunch of different clients in a bunch of different industries. But several times in my career, I did work in biotech. I did a bit of work in medical devices, did a little bit of work in healthcare services and provision over the course of the years. And then later in my career, I did a lot of work in biotech. Was working on the West Coast with a couple of leading biotech companies. So, for a long time, actually, it's if I total that up, it's going to be a bigger number than I want. But for decades, I've been working in and out of, I would say in and out of life sciences for decades. And then in 2010, I made the leap out of consulting and joined ResMed. And so I'm sure you know ResMed. Many of the people watching will know ResMed, world leader in sleep apnea therapy and CPAP therapy. I had been talking to ResMed about, I was such a weak consulting salesman that, I couldn't sell them consulting, but they offered me a job instead. And so ResMed asked me to come in and set up their strategy function, which was terrific. It was kind of a career change because I had been doing consulting for a long time. And I was pretty senior, but I just thought ResMed was so interesting, and I thought that what they were building in the sleep apnea space was really interesting. And I kind of made a decision that I'll go to the other side of the table. And that's what now? Gosh, that's like 16 years ago. Am I doing the math right? I think it's 16 years ago. And I had a great run at ResMed. We did so many interesting things. So I was the head of strategy there. And in that early span with ResMed, we created the strategy to connect the CPAP to the cloud and do remote monitoring and start to introduce machine learning and those sorts of things. And that totally changed the sleep industry, that move at ResMed. And we just had a great time changing that industry, disrupting it, serving patients a lot better, serving our channel partners a lot better. And out of that, I got invited to join the board at Insulet, who I know Omar. So Insulet, the maker of the Omnipod platform, Omnipod 5. I was sitting on the board as an independent director and leading the sleep business at ResMed when Shacey Petrovic decided she had to step out of the chair, the CEO chair at Insulet. So the board invited me to step into Insulet. And again, we just had a remarkable run. We launched Omnipod 5. We did great things. We went from number 3 to number 1. The Omnipod 5 was cloud connected. It had automated dosing and its, fantastic form factor and so on. And so I had a great run at Insulet and, did that for about 3 years, kind of accomplished everything that I had set out to accomplish as CEO. And then stepped out of Insulet last spring, last April-ish timeframe, and thought that maybe I would, basically go into semi-retirement. The other thing I do right now is I sit, in addition to leading BVI, which I'm sure that'll be the bulk of our conversation. Yeah. I sit on the board of Vantive, which is the kidney care business that's a spin out from, it's a Carlyle-backed spin out from Baxter Healthcare. And so I sit on that board. So I thought, I've had a great run here with a couple of companies. At ResMed and at Insulet, we really disrupted our industries and kind of, jumped into leadership in both cases, and maybe sit on a couple of boards. And then what happened was I got approached for the role at BVI, and I know we'll talk in more depth about BVI, but I just find BVI so exciting. I think that the technologies that we have are really innovative, and we have a really interesting opportunity at BVI once again to kind of disrupt, maybe in a little different way from ResMed and Insulet, but I think we have a real opportunity to deliver innovation and disrupt patient care and really help surgeons deliver great care and also high ease of use. So really excited to talk about BVI with you.
Well, let's talk about that for a little bit. Now, you've been with BVI since late January, leaving
Yeah.
Insulet. And
Yeah.
how has that transition been? How has that, what has that been like? And also, when you're coming on as a leader of a company, what are some of the first things you do from a strategic standpoint? Do you go in and shake up everything, or is it maybe a mild transition? Our audience would probably like to learn that when you become a CEO, what is kind of one of the first things that you do?
Yeah, it's a great, just to start with, the transition's been great. I mean, everybody's been so welcoming. And it's only about 8 weeks. I mean, it's hard to believe because we've covered a lot of territory in the last couple of months since I joined, but I'm just really grateful to the team and the board because I've been I feel really supported as the new CEO of the business, and so that's been fantastic. And in answer to the question about what do you do when you come in as a CEO, really every company is different. It's a cliche, but every situation's a little bit different. But I would say a couple of things. The first thing is you want to understand the market you're in.
Mhm.
And both, how does a med tech company create value for your stakeholders? And stakeholders are obviously patients, but in our case, surgeons. That's not true of, ResMed, it wasn't surgeons. It was a different healthcare provision channel. So for BVI, how do we create value for surgeons? How do we create great care for patients and contribute to that? What's the nature of the market? Who are our competitors? So you always want to understand the landscape. And for BVI, we're in a great market.
Mhm.
We do have very formidable competitors, but we're in a great market. It's amazing what we can do,
Mhm.
help our surgeons to deliver great vision for patients. It's a growing market because there's a tailwind of growth because most of the procedures that our devices get involved in are age related, and we've got aging populations in all of the major economies, right? So there's a tailwind of growth for us in this market, and it's a market that's driven by innovation. And like most med tech markets are driven by innovation, and we're in a really good position that way. So first thing, understand the market.
Yeah.
Second thing, really want to understand the technologies you've got and how you can innovate because innovation is so important. And in our case, we operate, and I think Omar will get into this in more depth, so I'll just say at a high level, we operate in 3 categories: consumables, intraocular lenses for cataract surgery, and then we're entering the equipment space. And
Sure.
in each of those 3 categories, we have really clear leading technologies and innovations that we can put in the hands of our customers, the surgeons. And so understand the tech and the products that you've got. And then the third thing is come in and understand the team and the talent base.
Mhm.
And I will just say it's one of the things that's been terrific for me coming in as the new CEO is we have really strong talent at BVI. We punch well above our weight. We compete with much bigger companies, but we punch well above our weight with our talent base. And not only do we have great people, but we have people who are really, really committed to what we're doing. And so, with that combination, we've got a great market, we've got great technologies, and we've got great people, which is really, people are really the engine for any business. So I think we're in a really exciting position, to drive innovation into the market and to grow our business and deliver value for our stakeholders. But every company is a little bit different. You come
Yep.
in, I've done this in 3 or 4 different settings, probably more than that really, but at the CEO level twice.
Mhm.
And you have to tailor what you do and how you prioritize. And I think for us, we're kind of a mid-sized company competing with a couple of big gorilla companies, and we
Mhm.
have to be really good at prioritizing and sequencing what we're doing. And that's what we're talking about now.
Gotcha. Well, let's go in and talk about some of those products and some of the segments that you're operating in. But let's talk about that right now.
So I've got 3, we've got 3 main categories at
Yep.
BVI. we're kind of best known historically for our consumables category, and what's in, we have literally thousands of SKUs in that portfolio. But really, the way to think about it is any instruments or knives or cannulas or fluids that a surgeon will use to operate on the eye, right? So that, for any given surgery, there's a whole range of eye surgery procedures, and there's different instruments and knives that people use for those. But probably our most well-known product in that portfolio is part of where we get our name. So BVI, was originally Beaver Visitech, and the Beaver blade, the Beaver safety blade, very, very well known, still very innovative and very desired blade for eye surgery. First invented, in its first version back in the 1930s. So the Beaver blade, but in that consumable portfolio, we have a whole range of instruments and cannulas and so on. And a big thing we do there that's quite differentiated is we customize packs for surgeons and surgical centers. And so out of that whole range of products, the customer can configure a specific pack for, say I want to do a cataract surgery, and every time I do a cataract surgery, I want a pack that has exactly these knives, exactly these cannulas, this drape. And so we create those custom packs so the surgeon has exactly what they need, exactly the way they want it, and nothing they don't need in the pack. And we're one of only 2 players that has that capability in the market. So that's a big advantage for us in consumables. The second category, intraocular lenses. So those are lenses that are used in cataract surgery and increasingly actually in refractive correction surgery. And if I just give your listeners kind of a quick sense of what that looks like, most of us, at least many of us, but probably most of us, as we get older, will end up with a cataract. And a cataract is in the lens in your eye. The lens in your eye is kind of it's like a little plastic sac that sits behind the iris. You've got the cornea is the outer thing. You've got the iris, which is like the thing in your camera that, the aperture. And then you've got a sac that's the lens. And that's like a little plastic sac that has kind of a gel-like material on the inside of it. And a cataract is when that gel-like material hardens and gets opaque. And so, many people as they age, they'll get a cataract, or they get cataracts in both eyes. And what the surgeon does is the surgeon goes into the eye, takes out the cataract, and then replaces it with a very small polymer lens that replaces the gel material of the lens. And I tell you, Omar, it's like science fiction to me, because somebody can walk into a surgeon's office. This is what our surgeons do for their patients. Somebody can walk into a surgeon's office with not much ability to see out of one or both eyes, fuzzy, doesn't focus well, opaque, and 15 minutes later walk out with clear vision. I mean, it's remarkable to me what these technologies deliver for patients and how surgeons can do that so effectively for patients. So our category of intraocular lenses is also quite innovative. And we have a whole range of lenses from monovision up to trifocal. But the flagship product for BVI is the fine vision trifocal lens, which has been on the market in Europe for over a decade. And we're really excited to be launching here in the US this year. We're in the early stages of our launch. We have FDA approval. That fine vision lens is just remarkable technology. It uses both refraction and diffraction. And what it delivers is, FINE actually is an acronym for far, intermediate, near, right? It delivers great clarity of vision all the way from a reading distance out to far vision just in one lens. It's market proven. It's a fantastic lens. It's terrific for surgeons to implant. It has a bunch of form factor advantages that we don't have to get into all that detail, but really proven, really demanded in Europe, and now bringing it to the US. So very exciting for us. And then there's a whole range of lenses that we'll bring along with fine vision, and we'll continue to innovate in the lens market where we've had a clear innovation advantage. And then finally, the third category is surgical platforms. And this is a new category for BVI. So there's 2 platforms. I'll talk about the main one is a platform called Virtuoso, which is a surgical platform. It's a console with, the ability to enter the eye and maintain pressure in the eye while surgery is happening. It's got a touchscreen interface, and somewhat uniquely, it's a single platform that allows the surgeon to operate on both the front of the eye and on the back of the eye. So do retinal surgery as well. So vitrectomy surgery, as they say. So the platform does cataract phaco surgery, and it does vitrectomy surgery. So anything that needs to be repaired in the back of the eye. Very up-to-date interface, fantastic technology, a really novel mechanism for maintaining pressure in the eye, which is really important. And then so we're in the regulatory process with that platform. We've done, you can imagine dozens of wet labs. Surgeons have used it. We have KOLs using it in investigation, and we're in the regulatory process in both the U.S. and in Europe for that platform. And our aspiration is to bring that. Obviously, want to bring it to market as soon as we can once we get clearance. We have another surgical platform I'll just mention called LEOS, which is a novel mechanism of action. It's a complete refresh and update of a product we already have on the market, which is an older version of the product. And what it allows the surgeon to do is to enter the eye and ablate the ciliary bodies, which bring fluid into the eye. It's a glaucoma surgical platform.
Okay.
Novel. Most glaucoma treatments are designed to evacuate fluid from the eye. This is the only surgical platform that actually ablates the influx of fluid into the eye. And we're getting great feedback, and that's also in very early launch in the US. So we take those three together, great consumables, really, really novel and innovative lenses. And now as we get clearances, we'll bring surgical platforms. All three categories have innovation in them. And together they offer a full portfolio to an eye surgeon or an eye surgery practice, all the way from, the blades, the best lenses, and then, fantastic ease of use, high ease of use surgical platforms to drive productivity in the theater, and also great outcomes for patients. And that's where we're headed over the next couple of years. We have a very exciting time in front of us.
Oh, strong products, very strong products in strong categories that you're in as well. But you've got some strong competition as well. Alcon, Bausch and Lomb, and Johnson and Johnson. These are some big players in the intraocular lenses space. How do you get your product out there and take market share when you have so many big names that are in the market?
Yeah. It's a great question. I'm the new guy, right? And you can imagine I've been asking myself that same question, because they're obviously great competitors, are very capable companies. And I think there's a couple of things I would say. The first one is our product set's really good.
Mhm.
I really, as I was considering joining BVI, it was part of my, kind of my diligence on the company coming in. And from the outside, I thought they looked like great products. And I'll tell you, now that I'm in the inside, I am very confident in our technologies. And as innovation drives growth in medtech, because innovation is about always making the outcome better for the patient, and the process easier and better for the healthcare provider. So for us, ease of use for surgeons, great outcomes for surgeons, efficiency in the operating theater, right? And for our patients, great vision, right? So we have really good technologies, which I think means that we can go toe to toe with very formidable competitors for whom we have a lot of respect, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, we're smaller,
Mhm.
and there's ways in which being small is a disadvantage, always, because scale is always helpful to a business. But we should be more nimble, and I think that we can be more nimble, right? And so I'm very confident. We've got great people, great technologies, and we should be able to be more nimble and more responsive to customers, more responsive to the market, and move quickly. And I think that that's how we're going to drive it. We've got really good commercial teams, we've got great support, we've got great technologies, and I think we can move more quickly. And that's part of the premise of what we're going to do over the next couple of years.
Yeah, just some incredible names out there, as competitors, but you're a smaller company and you have more freedom. And
Yeah.
sometimes when you're with larger companies, and I'm just speaking broadly here, there's a lot of bureaucracy and red tape just to get something done. And with smaller companies, you can just move forward with it. You can, I like to say you can fail faster, um,
Yeah.
and learn from your
Yeah.
mistakes and move forward, or you can have success much greater because you can take more chances and more risk, and it's a lot easier. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's right, Omar. And the challenge for us is we don't have that scale,
Yeah.
right? And so what we have to do, and I think I said this just a minute ago, but we have to be very disciplined about how we prioritize and sequence, right? So we've got to be nimble, and we've got to be disciplined and prioritized. But in this market, there's room for growth. There's room for us to really make a mark. we have products that, especially the lenses products, which have been on the market in Europe, they're very proven, great clinical data, great experience. And, it's a small surgical market. The surgeons all know each other. So the word of mouth reputation we have, especially with our lenses, is very strong. So we're going to make a mark. I'm very confident we're going to make a mark.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, let's talk about today's economic climate. Not trying to get political here, but mainly just talking about the climate. We have issues with tariffs that create a degree of uncertainty. Can they be enforced? Will they be enforced? Will you be reimbursed, etc.? How do you as a CEO deal with this uncertainty? And what are some of the practical steps on how to just mitigate uncertainty in general?
Yeah. That's a great question. I'm not gonna, as you can imagine, sorry my scratch here. As you can imagine, I'm not gonna opine on policy or anything or predict,
Sure.
Yeah, right. But I think it gets back to a little bit what I was saying. We have to be a little bit nimble. But we are a company that we already are a very global company. We're in 90 countries. We have a small but mighty team that we call trade compliance, that is always watching all this stuff, because we also have intra-company transfers of product and things like that we've been managing for years. And so, the first drop of tariffs predates my tenure, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But that team did a great job, pulled together cross-functionally, understood the impact really quickly. We managed that trade compliance. And I think that for a company of our size, I'm pleasantly surprised at our capability there. So on that specific issue of tariffs, we will be compliant. We'll see what happens with the policy outcomes. We understand the financial impact, and you can imagine there's a financial impact for us, but it's there, but it's nothing that it's just into materiality. Let's put it that way, right? And so we can manage those outcomes, and it'll be okay. And then in terms of like managing uncertainty broadly, forget tariffs for the moment, and just managing, sort of the environment, economics, competition, and that sort of thing. Again, you have to have as a company, as a CEO, I'll say, although I think of it as a management team and a company, you have to know what you're trying to accomplish. So if you set a really clear vision for what you're trying to accomplish, it's just like anything. It's like, if you're like the metaphor that comes to mind is, if you're a ship on the ocean and you know where you're trying to get to, there's going to be currents, there's going to be storms, there's going to be winds, but you've always got the objective of getting somewhere, and you can figure out how to deal with the weather along the way, right? You just have to be ready, and you have to know what you're trying to do. And so I think we've already done a really good job of managing through that specific uncertainty around tariffs. And I feel pretty comfortable that we have a very strong team that knows how to manage, not just our trade compliance team, which has done a great job, but just as a management team, I think we're very well equipped to adapt to the environment as anything unfolds.
Yeah, and I guess the crash course for any CEO or any company probably came during COVID when everything was shut down. Talk about uncertainty.
Yeah.
And conversations about elective procedures and if was an elective procedure, what can happen, what can happen. I think that is one of the biggest lessons of uncertainty that a lot of companies received, and I think it's helped them just navigate these waters with tariffs. And again, not getting political, but just talking about the policy. It's helped them navigate these waters a whole lot better. So
yeah, I think that's right. And I was at ResMed during COVID, and you can you'll remember what was going on ventilators and all that stuff.
Oh,
and,
yes.
And then I stepped into the role at Insulet not long after COVID, and I tend to see COVID as sort of a tidal wave that came in and then a tidal wave that came out, right?
Yeah.
And so there was disruption on the inbound and disruption on the outbound. And I think you're right, Omar. I think a lot of companies, and I think a lot of us, I think in general, business people and maybe the general population had to develop some resilience, right? And so I think that a lot of those lessons of that's the lemonade out of the lemon of COVID, probably, right?
Exactly. There's a trend now with a lot of companies moving manufacturing sites or constructing manufacturing facilities in Costa Rica. Is BVI following this trend, or can you talk broadly about how or if your manufacturing strategies have changed in the last few years or so? Yep.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting. There is actually there's a growing cluster. It's like an industry cluster down in Costa Rica for Medtech, and There's a clear trend there because of labor pools and things like that. For us, our manufacturing network is pretty much set.
Yeah.
We've built the manufacturing network through a series of acquisitions, which is how BVI got created, and we have manufacturing sites all over the world. The thing that's most like the Costa Rica play for us is we moved our main consumables factory from Waltham, Massachusetts, again predating me, 4 or 5 years ago. We moved from Waltham down to Juarez, Mexico, and so that's a purpose-built factory that we set up down in Juarez, and is a terrific factory, actually. Really efficient factory, great labor pool for us that we've been really happy with working in Juarez, and we're able to access talent and labor there very clearly. But we have a network that's all over the world, and the key thing for us is to make sure that we're managing all of those sites to the same standard, and installing the same QMS everywhere in the same standard. And that's a challenge for any company that has a lot of factories, but we don't have any plans to move anything else. Having moved Juarez, we don't currently have any plans to relocate a factory at this point.
Interesting. And I want to talk about now. I want to talk about the remainder of, well, the remainder. We're only in March, but it's gonna pass by very quickly, right? But I want to talk about 2026. What does it look like for the company, and what are you hoping to accomplish in 2026?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I tell you, 2026 is going to be a great year for us. The first thing is, if I just think about, you can almost think about it by category and by market, right?
Hmm.
The consumables business is our staple business, and we'll continue to drive that. And it's actually the business historically that we're known for in the U.S., because up till now we haven't had lenses or equipment in the U.S., right? So then take the U.S., the launch of the Fine Vision trifocal, which is our flagship lens, is just starting. We're getting great early feedback from our surgeons, and then we have a roadmap for other lenses into the U.S. And so we're in the FDA process on other lenses. And so 26 and 27, we'll be launching new lenses in the U.S. market on the anchor of the Fine Vision lens, which is such a fantastic offering. And so that's, we're also in the early launch in the U.S. of that LEOS, that glaucoma platform. And so U.S. has a lot going on, a lot of innovation. With Virtuoso, we're in regulatory process both on either side of the pond, if you will, right? So both in the U.S. and in Europe. And wherever we get clearance first will become the lead market for Virtuoso. Where, in Europe, we already have obviously a well-established consumables business and a well-established lens business. And so Virtuoso coming into the market in Europe as the lead geography, say, could make a lot of sense for us. And then that's the first time we'll have the whole portfolio on the market together, right? And so hopefully, it's kind of, my wife would say, knock wood, that we get clearance, we get timely clearance in one or both geographies, but we'll bring Virtuoso to the market. And so 26 and then into 27 for us are a period of time where we get to really start to expand the whole offering into the whole portfolio and really deliver for our surgeon customers and for their patients that end-to-end platform experience. And so really, really exciting times for us, over the 26 into 27 and into 28, but I'll say 26 and into 27, really exciting time for expansion of innovation on the market for BVI.
Well, Jim, thanks for coming on to Let's Talk MedTech. Really appreciate your time today.
Omar, it's a real pleasure, and I hope we get a chance to do it again soon. Thank you for the opportunity.
Sure. That's it for this episode of Let's Talk MedTech. Thanks again to our guest, Jim Hollingshead, BVI Medical CEO. Also, if you want more MedTech content, please visit us at mddionline.com. That's mddionline.com. You can even find the Let's Talk MedTech podcast there. Finally, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the Let's Talk MedTech podcast on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcast.